much. Well, it's a delight to come and chat with you today. I get to talk to you about something I haven't heard a lot today about, and that's numbers. Now, you all love numbers, you all love metrics, and that's why you got into the nonprofit field, so that you could look at numbers, right? No. But I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about Leo Burnett first. Leo Burnett, I have the longest title of any topic, but I couldn't resist as homage to Leo. He said, so human, so believable, creating depth of familiarity to build reputation and enhance mission building activities. Now, the reason, of course, Leo was a Michigan guy. He was born in St. John's, went to the University of Michigan. His first job was at Cadillac in Detroit before he moved to Chicago and built an agency that I would get to work at that would have Disney and McDonald's and Hallmark and a lot of pretty emotional brands surrounding them. But he gathered a group of people who had this mission on everybody's wall. The mission of the Leo Burnett Company is to create superior advertising. In Leo's words, the primary function in life is to produce the best advertising in the world, bar none. This is to be advertising so interruptive, so daring, so fresh, so engaging, so human, so believable, and so well-focused as to themes and ideas that, one and the same time, it builds a quality reputation for the long haul as it does for the immediate present. And the reason why I read that is that in that long phrase is the magic of outstanding brand building. It's the ability to see the big picture, to bring it down to a human level, and then to combine ideas in such a way, and we've heard about the strategy of that today, we've seen and heard about the emotion that that compels, and to find that idea is so important in your product. Well, our job was to look at numbers. You know, when I entered the nonprofit space, the people I really loved talking to were the people who talked individually to major donors. They had their stories, they had the reason that they gave, they had the central purpose for their giving. But when I talked to the people who were often doing the direct mail, the email solicitation, they didn't have quite the great stories because they were looking at all these numbers. And I said, well, we talked to millions of people when we looked at Hallmark. We looked at millions of people when we looked at McDonald's. And yet, out of that came really emotional stories. So maybe the job that I could do when I came into this field was to figure out how to bring numbers and translate them to emotions. And what Carl does, and he'll take you through that in a few seconds, is he takes those huge databases of all that giving, because our giving data is rich in the nonprofit field, and translates it into simple concepts that you can use in leveraging your business. So the very first thing I did when I came back from Australia, where I worked for 5 years for Leo Burnett, we had a problem. We had just been handed the seatbelt advertising account from the Ad Council, and only 14% of people were using seatbelts, and thousands of people were dying across the country. And this campaign that I'm going to show you briefly, because it's not fun to watch for a long time, was on air. I can get it to go. There we go. So I'm not sure you can see that well, but it's Heaven Can Wait, Buckle Up. And it shows the devastating thing that happens as a guy without seatbelt crashes through and lays bloodied on the hood. Now, I fortunately had a very simple job, and that was to have one insight, and that was people ignore what's too terrible to imagine. And oftentimes in the nonprofit world, we show people scenes that really they can't empathize with. It's the kid starving in Africa, it's the homeless person on the street, it's someone who we should be able to empathize with, but frankly, it's just too horrible to imagine. And we had a construct at Burnett that served us well. It was called viewer reward. And that is, when you do your communication, what reward are they getting? What are you doing for the person who wants to spend 30 minutes with you, or 5 minutes, or 10 minutes, or 7 seconds? What are you doing that gives them a reward for having spent that time with you? Part of it's information communication, but oftentimes it can be a smile, it can be a brief tear, it can be something that's meaningful to them. And so we came up with a campaign which was dummies don't wear seatbelts. And Vince and Larry, for the next 15 years, told us and showed us the same kind of scenes that they had just been watching, but they were endearing characters. You didn't mind watching them. And during that period, seatbelt advertising went from 14 to 79%. There were a few laws and a few policemen that were helping us along the way. And the ad council said that it saved 85,000 lives and $3.2 billion in cost to society. Well, that felt pretty good. And Burnett did that kind of advertising for a lot of different nonprofits or efforts through the ad council. So I launched this company, and the first thing I feared was that we were treating our donors as ATMs. We were going to them 50 times a year. We were asking for year-end pledges. We were asking for matching gifts. You know, we were saying, we need this money today. It's urgent. You need to give to us today. And, you know, so open rates now are about 20%, and giving rates are about 1%. And why? Because often we treat them as ATMs. We say, we need the money, spit out your money for us. And we show them horrific scenes of what we're doing. And we have good reasons to show that. It, quote, works. But does it work as well as it could? Well, my simple hypothesis is that there are lots of reasons people give. And I want to understand those reasons. There are a lot of people, a lot of numbers, but there are also lots of reasons. And I want to find the reason that really connects with the donor. Not everything we do, but the things that we do that make a difference. And similarly, people are not so interested in the horrible shot of the person who's homeless, but maybe the shot of someone helping them in a way that they think fundamentally makes sense to them. Does that person have PSTD? Is that person needing some support because they've been abused by their husbands? Are they out there because they just can't take the establishment feel of being in an organized home? What can we do to the specific need? It's complex. But when we connect these two things, why people want to give, to what the real solution that we're giving to people, then we can be, like the children's hunger story that we heard earlier, more connected to giving them the final solution that will work well. But let's talk a little bit more about numbers. Let Carl talk.
Thanks, Josh. So I worked at Wells Fargo, as they announced, for 10 years. And in that time, I got to work with a customer database of 125 million people. Got to see huge data. I got to see lots of ways that we could be actionable, and I got to work with a product that nobody wants to quit because they don't want to figure out how their paycheck should go for next week. But what really drove me to come to McQueen Mackin in January was the opportunity to use my unique experience of learning with the largest data and bring the experience down to nonprofits that have 10,000 people who have given to them, have 5,000 people who have given to them. The insights pretty much stand the same, just like a lot of the work that my dad has done with Belief that helps us understand why people will buy a Nike shoe or why they will go to Disney World. Also translates into the nonprofit world is that all of this is human knowledge, and it all can work across the board. A lot of the decision knowledge that you can do from database is not personal. I'm one of the people who can get pretty jaded about like looking at the numbers and looking at who the people are because I look at big numbers all the time. One of the things that I've gotten to learn from my dad is always look for the story, always look for what you can bring back, what you can tell from your data. So one of the studies that we've done for many of our clients is called a class of analysis. A lot of you probably use companies to handle your databases. It's just not something that small companies want to deal with in-house, and they have different metrics that they give you to try to help you understand your donor base, like how long have you engaged with them, when was the last time they gave, these kind of simple KPIs that kind of are frequent updaters to what your level of connection is. But in the same way, because it's an equation, it can feel, like my dad is saying, that the client or your donor feels like an ATM. When we really dug into it and kind of tried to understand from the whole database perspective, some of our clients have 50 years of experience, 50 years of running, some have more than that, some have 5 years. But when you take the whole database and you take the data that you have, and then you condense all of that noise down to a class of, so the year that the donor first ever gave to you, you kind of lock in some of the important things, what kind of marketing you were using at the time, what was your mission at that time, and it causes the groups of people to be similar so that you can do additional discrete cuts to get further insights into your donors. The kind of things that helps us do is get us all the way down to a cost per donor, and then use that insight to get the cost per donor in the lifetime level. So things that you have from your marketing team, you have response rate. Things that you have from your finance guy, which also can be in marketing, would be your cost per contact, how much those mailings costed, how much you spent to get the list, how you acquired the data. But the piece that we've really encouraged people to make sure that they include is the average first gift. And that's literally the first gift, not over the first year, but like literally the first gift that you gave. The reason we say that is because over multiple clients that we've studied, the numbers on the left change a little bit depending on what kind of nonprofit it is, depending on what kind of gifts you're able to ask for. If you work with iDonate and you give a car, it's a lot different than a $0 to $25 gift. There's a lot of things that can change on the left side, but what we have found is that the ROI on that first gift, when you condense it down and you look over all the different classes, the donors that have given you under $25, whatever was proposed to them, whatever was talked to them about, I think a lot of times about those phone calls where they're like, would you be willing to give $25 a day? And I'm like, you call me at a really bad time, I'd like to get off the phone. They're like, well, what about 10, maybe 5? You know, the last second, come on, right? So the people that are landing in under $25, the lifetime ROI that we found when we've studied it is negative. They never outgive what you've put into them. But even in the $25 to $50 gift, we found that in the lifetime ROI, it's 3 times that year one spend. The 50 to 250 and then the 250 plus, the reason that we cut it is because, as many people have talked, your 250 plus gift and goes much, much higher are your major donors, and most of them are very talked to. We don't find that we need to talk to many nonprofits about how to talk to your best donors. They're getting phone calls when they give, you call and you thank them. You do a great job with the people who keep the lights on, but there is usually the largest number of your givers in groups. Well, the largest is always group 1, but 2 and 3 are actually usually quite large givers, and their happiness and where they're at is something that most of the software out there isn't going to really tell you how to improve. So as it's already been mentioned, across all the databases that we work with all the different people that have asked us to help out, dealing with your leaving donors is huge. But it's really only a problem over the year 1, 2. You're still going to lose 23% additional the next year. But from year 4 onward, when we look at it, you've kind of locked in your people. So your first few years of messages is vital. Like how you communicate, how you get into somebody's giving plan that they're giving to you each year is really important. And that's because when you look at our next slide, well, we've found that people's gift size doesn't actually change. There's some people who are in the $100 range and they go to $10,000 and you're really excited. But what actually increases when you look at like the line items of giving is that $100 givers, once they've really locked in with you, will give $100 more times during the year when they see your newsletter or they see their I'm a $100 guy, I'm a $100 girl, continues and just actually increases how many times. So the retention is important, but some people will say try to get your people to give above where they give, but just understand that maybe not more per gift, but like, hey, do you want to give 4 times? Do you want to give 3 times? Like, could we set up a plan, like auto pay? Like, are these the kind of things that we could set up? Because once people have locked in with you, they're with you. You're not asking them like you're begging, but you're saying, do you want to come alongside us? Do you want to continually help us? Do you want to be part of our story? Oh. So the last slide that I'll talk about before handing you back to my father, who will talk to you about how we also get into the thoughts and feelings, is just that the class of analysis that we're always happy to help nonprofits where not only helps you understand this year's ROI and the ROI to date, but we have a lot of tools that we've developed over years to help with predictive analytics, to help you, on an individual, predict lifetime ROI, which can help with crafting a message. There's a lot of temptation when the analytics guys talk to the marketing people about like thousands of messages for all the different people in your database, but the reality is budget usually has 1 to 3 messages. So when you kind of lock down the year of analysis, it helps you kind of assign people to the different messages and lets you know that you could actually do targeted marketing as a small company, but not onto this unrealistic down to each giver. That's not what we're advocating for. It's the quickest way to go broke. But does allow you to kind of spread out the way that you speak to your donors.
So a lot of the work we do is helping people with a process. And the normal process we see, oops, I don't know which way I'm going. Sorry. The normal process we see looks something like this. It says, I really want to tell people what we do. I really want to communicate clearly all the things that we do. And I've got these very different places to communicate in. It's becoming more and more fragmented every year. And it is tricky to do them right, to be an expert at social media, to be an expert at direct marketing, to be an expert at event marketing. So I'll give people the different assignments. So what you tend to see happening across a lot of nonprofits is that we're saying a lot of things in a lot of mediums and not saying them under a coordinated schedule. It becomes very difficult to do that. But what we've learned is that it's a mistake to share your mission and your full range of your capabilities. It's a mistake to sell your full range of your activities. And that's because 2 things drive giving from a mathematical standpoint. It's depth of familiarity, not awareness, and trust. And when you spread your message, a lot of times people will get less and less comfortable that you can really do all those things well. And so they lose trust, and they think, I don't know if I really know that organization. I knew they did this, but I didn't know they did that. One of the very first clients I worked with when I left the for-profit space was St. Jude's. And St. Jude's does amazing breadth of activities. They're, solving brain tumors in kids today. They're developing pharmaceuticals that only 12 kids in the country will need, but genetically, it'll save those 12 kids' lives. And when they start telling people that, their giving goes down. When they show those bald-headed kids in Memphis that they're paying their trip to there and saying, we look after kids and develop protocols, we're a research hospital that'll save kids' lives, it's believable, because they do, and it raises money. But when they start talking about the breadth of activities they do, why they need almost $1 billion a year to accomplish their goals, people's eyes fog over, and they actually get less money per offer. Now, there's some targeted messages. They found that entrepreneurs love the idea of the pharmaceutical-specific products because they get that no big pharmacology lab would do that. So they love that story. So they find individual messages for targets that really understand and want that message. But by simplifying their message and building trust, they raise so much money so much more effectively. I'm having trouble with the slides, obviously. So what I'm going to really talk about is how do we take the science of talking to a lot of people and get to where you need to be, which is to understand your donor as a whole person. It's that conversation that we just had where we just don't interject ourselves quickly, but we really dig deep to understand who they are. So what are the things that we need to know from our massive donors that are really about the subtlety of who they are, that really allows us to understand them? And we've heard the first one often, and that's values. Now, we've been building this model for the last 20 years, and it's a common model in the value sphere, but it turns out to be really not very difficult to ask about if you ask about it in the right way. It turns out that, we're very much interested in ourselves, that's the left-hand side of this map, and we're interested in others, the right-hand side. And we're interested in having change happen, but we're also more comfortable with stability. We like to be adventurous, but let's do it from a responsible standpoint. We like to be idealistic, but let's make sure we deliver pragmatically. So these are dynamic tensions in the world of our core values. And if you ask people if these are important to them, the answer is yes. All of these are important to all people around the world. We've done these studies in 16 countries around the world, and in China, these are the important values. Behind the former Soviet curtain throughout Central and Eastern Europe, these are the important values. So if you go out and ask people, are these important to you? They'll say, yeah, it's important I look after myself. It's important I show compassion to people. Yeah. So what you do is you do it in a paired comparison way, and you ask them, well, which is more important to you? That's the first step. The second step is you have to frame it. What I get out of giving is different than what I typically get out of work. And what I get out of work is different than what I get out of my faith. And so I don't expect the same values to be delivered across giving to my faith, to giving to nonprofits, giving to at work. For instance, if you don't ask the right questions, you don't get the right answers. For 10 years, I spent time asking people, how much money do you give to your charity nonprofits? How much money do you give to your church? And I was really concerned about the data because the African American community and the Hispanic community give so much less on those two dimensions. And then I asked the question, how much do you give to your friends and family and people in need? And suddenly I found out that the African American community and Hispanic give more per person, per household, as a percentage of their income than do white non-Hispanics. So it's asking the right questions. Well, this starts to get at some key things. So when you say we want to match our customers' values, maybe you should measure people's values. And when we do that, we find interesting things. Here's the core values of the Salvation Army donor. They're very much into their faith, valuing traditions, taking life serious and responsible, about being fair-minded and seeking better solutions, of raising people up through self-sufficiency. A Salvation Army person wants the Salvation Army to be giving them a hands up, not a handout. And they believe that they have the eyes and ears in the community to do just that. And they feel that what they're offering people is security. Now, they look quite different, if I can show you. Oh, by the way, I couldn't resist. Doing the most good. We're doing more good. They're doing the most good. Sorry. But they also fight for the good. So somewhere in between is where we are, right? So here are the core values of the national parks donor. They're about being innovative and willing to take risk and adventurous, going out and climbing that peak and reaching my full potential and showing compassion and being fair-minded and showing tolerance. They're living this exciting life. So you can imagine the Salvation Army person, as you describe them, as responsible and faithful and fair-minded and compassionate. This lady hugging her daughter or some person who needs her help. And you can imagine the national parks donor striding across the prairie field and being idealistic and embracing change and tolerance and compassion and seeking better solutions. And so if you simplify it, donors, right across the spectrum, all the time we measure them, are seeking better solutions. Donors are showing compassion. But the underlying values that surround that need, every time we ask for different areas of nonprofits, we find dramatically different values. And understanding what is feeding their compassion, what is feeding this, can become very useful as you develop your message. The second major thing that if you really want to know your donor, you want to do, is how are they confronting change? Change is the dynamic of our world today. Everybody is being beat up by change. They're an industry that's been disrupted. The era of having a business for 50 years and handing it over to your son who does the exact same thing that you did for the last 30 years, not happening. Major things are disrupted, and people know that there's change. And part of the change is some of the things that they view as precious are no longer seeming to be true. Some of the things that they would like to pass on as values don't seem to be being passed on any longer. And we call this declining values, declining virtues. And this is a rank order of an American profile of things that people are very concerned about. And look at what's at the top of the list this year: honesty. And does that surprise you? No one really believes in that anymore. And the 6 major themes that we found is people are really concerned about loss of trust in leaders, of a lack of tolerance in our society, of an unwillingness to seek knowledge for knowledge's sake, of patriotism, of personal ethics, and concern about whether we're being civil with each other. And those are very deep concerning. And they differ by the type of people who give to different nonprofits. So again, on the data that we collected from national park donors, they were concerned about the loss of tolerance, about people not being open-minded, about leadership. One of the things we found, if you want to be a leader in your field in the world of nonprofits, don't call yourself a leader. The word leader has come to mean someone who aspires as opposed to someone who's doing. People respect leaders who do. They don't respect today leaders who say, I'm a leader, maybe I'm not willing to support you. Here's what we're doing to make a change in our society. People are willing to support you. On the other hand, Salvation Armies were really concerned about the loss of parental authority and people's declining faith in God and their belief in America and their work ethic and self-discipline. Talking to someone's concern is often a very rich place to begin a conversation that will lead to a donation. And so if you can understand where their major areas of concern are and can connect them to your nonprofit, you've made a huge jump across that bridge of understanding them, not just telling them about you. So as people read about the mission, how do they feel? Well, one of the good things about caring about emotion, and you should because it's really the first signal of where someone is that we have a very limited emotional vocabulary. There are only 840 words that describe how people feel in the English language that are in common use. So you can build a lexicon in surveys and instruments very quickly to try to grasp the major areas that they're feeling. Because when you typically ask, you're standing at a cocktail party and you say, how are you feeling? The answer is good, not so good, bad. It tends to be just evaluative. But all emotions have not only evaluative natures, strong and weak and for and against, but a component of specificity that if you use the right words, you can start to gather. And the Bible is a guy named Pluchik who measured all 840 words systematically across time. So if you want to go the academic route, you can look up Pluchik and find his wheel of emotion, and people, and if you build off that, you'll find all the lexicons of emotion that fit within these dimensions. And the short guide we use is this. It turns out, just in terms of technique, that you can't have a scale that says, I feel happy, agree, disagree, unless you also have, I feel sad. Because the opposite of happy is not necessarily sad, so you can't assume. And people, when you have bipolar scales in emotion, they don't work. So you have to ask both sides of good and bad at all times when you measure emotion. But it's very measurable. And so what you want to do is use it as a dipstick. Is there enough oil in the tank? Why people are emotion ties to their values. So it turns out that whenever you use emotion as a guide star, you have to take the next step. And the next step is understanding why do they feel that way. And that comes from their core values. So if someone, we did a study for a faith tradition about pro-life, and we included all Americans, and the same strong visual for pro-life message left a lot of people feeling disgusted, angry, mad. It brought up, the feeling of being judged that they felt when their cousin had a abortion and no one in the family understood. And, there's all these intense negative feelings that a lot of people have around that subject. But it's coming from their value system and their experience, and just knowing the emotion is never enough. You have to, if you're going to measure emotion, make sure you're capturing and understanding why they're feeling what they're feeling. But it allows you to ask the right question, the follow-on question that we just had that wonderful exercise to sort through. It's important to know where you stand. And, the thing I said earlier, we passionately believe, trusted familiarity. What does it predict? Well, mathematically, it predicts willingness to support an organization for the first time, higher levels of retention, higher average gifts per year, and higher lifetime value. Pretty much the whole shooting match. But a lot of the clients that I first started working with wanted to measure awareness. Well, here's an example of why not to do that. Planned Parenthood National Rifle Association. And here's the political spectrum. Planned Parenthood should not spend a lot of money to get conservatives feeling good about them. It's not going to happen. And the National Rifle Association shouldn't spend a lot of money trying to get liberals to support them. And it turns out that when you build awareness, people who are for and against your cause are more likely, i.e. they're involved in the cause, are dramatically more likely to become aware than not. But like that first scene of the guy breaking through the window, it is dangerous to get people just riled up. Depth of familiarity comes not from just being shocked or ready to jump up, but giving them a permission to believe what you say. So the facts that you support your argument with are only going to be listened by those who agree with you. So for depth of familiarity measures that. So if you look at depth of familiarity with these two organizations, the ones who have high depth of familiarity are the very ones who are likely to promote and give money to you and support you in all sorts of ways. And that's just the technical reason for why depth of familiarity works and awareness does not. Well, the good news is that donors are very happy to share their passion for you. All you have to do is ask. So in the same way that major givers will sit down with you and share their passion and tell you their story, and you can really probe and understand and finally find a way to connect your organization to theirs in a way that is good for them, talking to your large number of small donors, it's equally possible to dive down and understand them, to go through the big maze of the database and find the simple truths, and to look through and develop measures that talk to values, talk to emotions, and talk to ways of building trusted familiarity. And that's all I have for you. Thank you.